They say that on a moonlit winter night in the Appalachians, an adult bobcat, wild, solitary, and no longer a kitten, walked through the snow to return to a place that was no longer its den. It did not return for food, nor to seek shelter from the cold. It simply approached an old den where, among moss and decaying leaves, an old bear lay still, eyes closed, breathing slowly. No growls, no cries, only the sound of snow falling on fur. The bobcat crept closer, then rubbed its cheek against the bear's body like a child gently reaching out to a memory. And the old bear, despite not being of the same blood, not of the same species, not sharing a language, shifted slightly, making room, so that a child not born of her flesh could once again lie near her heart. That story isn't in any biology book. It isn't written in textbooks on wild instincts. No one ever taught a bear how to mother something she once might have hunted. But it happened in an old shed on a hillside in Appalachia, when a grieving mother bear chose to love two orphaned bobcat cubs as if they were her own. A journey that, even at the end of a life, left one witness still unable to answer. Was it instinct, or was it love? The porch light still burns, though no one passes anymore. Though not a single lost traveler has come by all year. Though the power has gone out more than once due to strong winds sweeping through the old transformer, it still glows, the faded yellow light of a life not yet willing to dim. Caleb Monroe lives alone, 58 years old. At that age, people start counting breaths instead of dollars. He has no one left to call, no place left to return to. But he remains in the old house on the side of the Appalachian Mountain, where spring arrives late and wolves howl near dawn. No one asks him why he's still here, and he never says. Only he knows that he's still waiting for something, not a miracle, but something so quiet it could make a heart skip a beat. His farm is as humble as he is, a sparse chicken coop, 2 old horses named Whiskey and June, and a creaky wooden porch that moans whenever the wind cuts through. The apple tree behind the house is half dead, but the other half still blossoms every spring as if the word decay had never existed. Caleb used to be a wildfire firefighter. He once ran through burning hills at night, carrying motherless fawns. He once held the hand of his 11-year-old son, a junior crew member, when the boy panicked in thick smoke. Now, the boy is gone. His wife left too, and Caleb remains, with a scar on the back of his neck, a folded old photograph, and a gray-black jacket still hanging by the door. Unwashed, unforgotten. Every morning, he brews coffee in a chipped aluminum kettle, pours it into a porcelain cup with a lightning-shaped crack, sits on an old wooden chair, gazing out toward the eastern woods, where a dirt path has been almost completely swallowed by weeds. He doesn't expect anyone to come, but he still waits. Each morning, he looks, not to search for someone, but to make sure the world is still turning, that a bird still flies by, a fox still lingers at the fence, that he still exists within something greater than himself, even if no one names it. Caleb has a dream, not to be rich, not to be young again, not even to be forgiven, but to witness, just once, something so beautiful that it doesn't need to be understood. Not in a book, not in a dream, but here, on the very land he has aged with. And then, one April morning, when the mist hadn't lifted and the rooster hadn't crowed a second time, an unfamiliar sound crept into the dawn. Not loud, not clear, just like a breath forgotten behind a wooden wall, as if someone, or something, had whispered its first cry for help. At first, Caleb thought it was the wind. Then, perhaps a fox sneaks into the chicken coop. But no, wind has no breath, and foxes don't make sounds like they're trying to keep the world from knowing they're still alive. The sound was trembling, wet and short, like a heart cracking into a breath. Caleb didn't rush. No one lives alone and stays in a hurry. He poured coffee, walked once around the broken fence, patted June's neck, and only then circled to the back of the farm, to the old wooden shed he once used for broody hens. For years now, its hinges had sagged, and moss covered the tin roof. Inside was only dust and damp straw, waiting to collapse. Yet that morning, when he pushed the door open, he froze. Not from fear, but because nothing in 58 years of living near the forest had taught him what to do when faced with the impossible. A black bear lay curled in the corner of the shed. Large, silent. The scent of earth and fur filled the air like a primal warning. But it wasn't the bear's body that took his breath. It was what lay beneath her. Two tiny creatures, sparsely furred, eyes not fully open. Bobcat cubs. Nursing from the space beneath the bear's belly, their paws trembling as they clung to her thick fur like it was the last warmth left in the world. The bear didn't growl. She only tilted her head slowly as if she had known he would come. Her eyes were not fierce, nor pleading. They were simply cautious, the kind of caution that comes from having lost more than once and refusing to lose again. Caleb didn't move. He didn't dare breathe deeply. He just stood there, between the scent of old straw and colostrum, staring at a scene that made his rational world dissolve like smoke. It was a bear, and two bobcat kittens, and between them, a kind of love that had no name. The mother bear, if one could call her that, slightly raised her head. A small gesture, but enough to say, "I know you see, but please, don't take them from me." Caleb slowly stepped back. Didn't close the door, didn't say a word. Only as he turned to leave, his hand rose unconsciously to his chest, where his heart beat slower than usual. The next morning, Caleb called Jesse, a wildlife researcher at the University of Kentucky, who had worked with bears in the northern mountains. He said only one thing: "I think you should come. Something's happening in the old shed." Jessie Ramos was not one to be easily shaken. She was a woman of winters, had lived for years in the Yukon forests, once pulled a bullet from a wild bear's leg without anesthesia. The press once called her the girl who talks to beasts. But when she arrived at Caleb's farm, her pickup truck came to a slow halt at the slanted wooden gate. Caleb didn't say much, just pointed to the back. Jessie walked straight to the shed, her boots thudding softly on the damp boards. And when she stopped before the scene, a bear lying still, two bobcat kittens dozing lightly against her chest, Jessie forgot to blink. The mother bear lifted her head gently. No growl, no motion, just a look, as if she had grown used to people entering and leaving her life. Jessie whispered, almost to herself, "Oh God, it can't be." She knelt, hands not touching the ground, just to get closer, to be sure that what she saw wasn't a trick of light and faith. Jessie had seen bears defend humans from wolves, had witnessed mother bears carry their dead cubs for miles just to keep them from the crows, but she had never seen a bear mothering bobcats, two species that should share nothing but territory, the scent of flesh, and the race to survive. Bears eat bird nests, snap foxes' necks. Sometimes they raid bobcat dens to steal prey or stored food. And bobcats, cunning, cautious, and proud by nature, see anything bigger as a threat, anything weaker as prey. So then, what happened? What made a nest breaker become a nest? What made a massive, omnivorous, solitary creature choose to lie still, suppressing every instinct so as not to hurt the fragile lives beneath her chest accidentally? And more importantly, what happens if this is only temporary? What if the bear changes her mind? What if hunger, sudden and primal, overtakes reason? What if instinct, sooner or later, reclaims its rhythm? Jessie didn't say it aloud, but her eyes wandered as if counting all the ways this could end. Caleb, standing behind her, lit a cigarette, something he hadn't done in over a decade. He didn't smoke it, just held it, as if needing something to keep his hands from trembling. Both of them knew a beautiful act doesn't mean it's safe, and a miracle can still shatter if someone steps in too soon. The old shed behind Caleb's farm, once just a forgotten corner of memory, has now become a sacred silence. No one walked in without slowing their step. No one spoke loudly. Even the old horses, like whiskey, stopped rustling when passing by, as if the whole forest had agreed, this place no longer belongs to man. Jessie didn't come alone. She brought 2 young colleagues from the university, kids who still believed everything could be explained by science. But after their first morning witnessing it firsthand, they grew as quiet as she was. No debates, no hasty notes. Maggie, the name Jessie gave the mother bear, still lay there. Still but not passive. She moved, but by her own rhythm, unrushed, unafraid. Each movement from Maggie felt like it came from a language too ancient to translate. They placed the first motion sensor camera on the second night when Maggie left the shed for about 10 minutes. Just long enough for the team to install a small device under the thatched roof without disturbance. It was a near-invisible, no-glow camera, the kind Jessie had used to track wild bobcats in the Wyoming forest. But she had never thought she'd use it to study something like mothering. The next morning, they gathered around a laptop on Caleb's kitchen table. The screen flickered with the night, moonlight filtering through rotted beams, and in the gray hush, Maggie. Huge, ink black, eyes glowing with moonlight. The 2 bobcat cubs, Ash and Briar, as the team had named them, curled up, resting their heads on the bear's belly, like fallen leaves drifting to the stillest corner of the forest. Nothing happened. Yet no one looked away because of the way Maggie used her massive paw to nudge a tender root closer to Briar's mouth. The way she leaned in, gently licking Ash's ear when he twitched in his sleep. The way she breathed, steady, round, enveloping, as if these 2 were the last breaths she had left to give. Jessie rewound. Hit pause. See that? She pointed to the moist ring beneath Maggie's eyes. She still has milk. She spoke softly, as if afraid to crack the miracle. She might have just lost her own cubs. Caleb sat behind her. He said nothing, just gripped the edge of the table. He didn't need evidence. For him, he'd seen enough. A man who lives alone may not believe in textbooks, but he believes the eyes of a creature that has known loss. Because he'd seen that look before. In the mirror, the morning his wife left. And again, when the doctor placed a hand on his shoulder after his son's first scan, in that cold gray room that smelled of antiseptic. Maggie didn't need to cry to be known as hurting. She just needed to stay. In the days that followed, the research team installed 3 more cameras, one beneath the slanted eaves, one by the maple tree outside the shed, and one near the rusted water trough where Maggie often passed after short trips into the forest. They began documenting behaviors. Maggie didn't just lie there. She brought back mashed berries, laying them gently by the cubs' mouths. She dug a shallow dip into the straw, shaping a nest with the precise warmth of a feline's touch. And most notably, She made low, strange sounds. Neither growl nor typical bear call. A kind of soft rumble, almost like breathing. Steady, rhythmic, like a lullaby. Who taught her to do that? One student whispered. Jessie only shook her head. No one did. You can't learn something that doesn't exist in books. It can only come from somewhere deeper than instinct. She wrote in her research log, April 6th, female black bear. Signs of recent loss of offspring. Still producing milk. Voluntarily caring for 2 non-related bobcat cubs. No aggressive behavior. No rejection behavior. Licks, feeds, protects. Each act aligns precisely with maternal patterns of a separate species, but is not from her kind. This behavior is not recorded in any existing data. She looked up at Caleb. You know, bears usually kill unrelated male cubs if they come near their own. Caleb nodded. But she doesn't have her own anymore. A simple sentence, but it silenced the whole kitchen. On the 10th night, the camera recorded Maggie lifting her head at a distant growl. She didn't flinch. She simply shifted her massive body over the cubs, pulled them close, and lowered her head like a giant blanket. Everyone watched the clip, in silence. No one spoke. Maggie, the bear, was no longer just a wild creature. She was what remains when pain fails to destroy. She was the world's way of saying, I've taken from you once, but this time I will let you keep something, so long as you're gentle enough. The rain began that Saturday afternoon. Not hard, not furious, just that lingering Appalachian rain, soft as mist but relentless. Caleb was still feeding the stove when water began trailing down the stone steps. He looked up at the sky and murmured, The creek won't hold for long. The creek behind the house, usually just a gentle stream winding around the hillside, on nights like this, could become something else entirely. He had seen it drown the cornfield back in '94, had once pulled a horse from the mud with nothing but a rope and a whispered prayer. But now he wasn't thinking about fields or horses. He was thinking about the old shed and the lives sleeping inside it. He put on his hat, grabbed a flashlight, and crossed the yard in the rain. Every step was heavier than the last. The rain beat against his back like someone calling out a name he no longer remembered. By the time he got close, the water had risen to the shed's doorstep. The crooked door hung slightly ajar, and inside were eyes. Black eyes. Wide open, wet, unblinking. Maggie. Caleb stopped, didn't step in, didn't call out. He just stood there, his flashlight aimed down at the water, illuminating what had silenced him. Maggie, the massive bear, was crouched fully down in the straw. Her body blocked the entrance where the water was pushing in. It had reached her legs, then her belly, then her neck. But she didn't move. The 2 bobcat cubs lay between her front legs, trembling. No one taught a bear to do that. No instinct demanded she stay. She could have stood up in a single motion and escaped, made her way to higher ground, to the edge of the forest, back to the old den where she once slept through winter. But Maggie didn't leave. She curled herself tighter, a wall of flesh and fur, blocking the water, blocking the wind. Her head bowed low as if in prayer or an apology. Caleb felt something wetter than rain run down his face. Not creek water, not tears, just something in his chest breaking quietly, like a branch snapping beneath snow. He stepped back, waited under the porch roof, waited for the rain to stop. The next morning, Jessie and the research team arrived. The camera, placed in the corner of the shed, had captured everything, from the moment Maggie first heard the water to when the small flood rushed in. Frame by frame, it became living proof of what science had never dared to declare. that the will to protect can rise above instinct. Jessie played the footage, slowed it down. They saw the beam of the flashlight slicing through the cracked door. Caleb saw Maggie lower herself, pressing flat to the ground as the water rose, saw her shiver, but not move. And then, when a larger surge rushed in, sweeping away half the straw, Maggie stretched her paw and pulled the two bobcats into her chest the way a mother wraps both arms around her child in a snowstorm. She lowered her head, shielding them. Her whole body trembled in silence. No growl, no cry for help, just a single act. So deliberate, no one could call it instinct anymore. Jessie brought a hand to her mouth and cried, a kind of crying, almost grateful, as if she had just witnessed something not everyone gets to see in a lifetime. This isn't instinct anymore. This is the will to protect. It's a choice. It's loyalty to something that doesn't even belong to her. Brianna, a senior field student, always skeptical, whispered, if she were human, they'd call her a hero. Jessie didn't answer. She rewound to the moment Maggie used her paw to block the water, paused on the frame where the bear's eyes stared directly into the camera. Not afraid, not desperate. Just one silent message. I will not leave. Even if it costs something inside me. I will not leave. After the storm, the skies cleared. Caleb and Jessie entered the shed. Maggie was breathing hard. Her fur was still damp, but her eyes half closed. The two bobcats slept against her chest, peaceful, as if the night had been just a wet dream. No one said a word. Jessie simply placed a dry cloth near the corner of the shed. For when she needs it, she said. That evening in her research notebook, Jessie wrote only one line. Tonight, I don't want to prove anything. I just want to believe. After the flood, everything quieted, as if even nature was holding its breath out of shame. Maggie survived. Ash and Briar, the two young bobcats, still curled beside each other every morning, mouths sticky with forest fruit, tails curled like commas left unfinished. And then something strange began. Not all at once, not with grandeur, but in small shifts, so subtle you had to be very still to see them. The camera began recording behaviors no one on the team dared label. Maggie, a full-grown female bear, was not teaching the bobcat cubs as a bear teaches her young. She didn't teach them to climb using claws, didn't lure them to the stream to fish, didn't shove them into mud to sharpen reflexes. Instead, she observed how they moved, quick, stealthy, favoring low shrubs, and slowly began adjusting her gait whenever she led them outside. Maggie began pausing at every fork in the path, sniffing the air, then turning back, letting out a low, throat-deep sound, just half a second long. The first time Jessie heard it, she thought Maggie was growling, but after a few days, the team noticed that the sound was meant only for Ash. With Briar, Maggie used a shorter, clipped call, more like the mewing sound cats make when calling to a kitten lagging behind. Two tones, two children, two entirely distinct ways of calling. Jessie wrote in her notebook, Maggie is crafting a language, not bear, not bobcat, something in between, something that only appears when love no longer knows how to speak the old instinct. One morning, the camera by the fence captured Maggie leading the cubs out of the shed to a red maple tree. She sat and waited, gave no commands, didn't push. She simply placed her hind paw on the tree root as if to demonstrate. Ash watched. Briar stepped back. Maggie reached out a claw, gently scratching the bark. a behavior not found in any bear's instinct, not to mark territory, not to forage, but as if inviting. A few minutes later, Ash tried placing a paw up, slipped. Maggie didn't growl. She just lowered her head, touching her nose lightly to his shoulder, a gesture like a pat. Bears don't do that. But Maggie did, and she did it at the right time, with the right pressure, carrying the right meaning. In the days that followed, Briar began sneaking after squirrel packs, not to hunt, but to learn how to stalk. Jessie laughed watching the footage, and then fell silent, because Maggie was stalking too, but not prey, her daughter, and each time Briar veered off course, Maggie gently tapped the ground with her claw, a soft sound like a pebble landing on dry bark. But Briar heard it and corrected herself. "She's teaching like a bobcat," Jessie said. "Not through commands, not through dominance, but through quiet, timely presence." Caleb, after many days of simply observing, finally said one sentence over dinner. "She's not teaching them to be bears. She's teaching them to be themselves. Better." At night, Maggie didn't sleep right away. The cameras recorded her licking each cub's ear, a behavior identical to that of bobcat mothers used to soothe their young before leaving the den. At first, Jessie thought it was a coincidence, but by the 6th time, when Briar was pestering Ash in the middle of the night, Maggie extended a paw, gently brushed Briar's ear, then nuzzled into her shoulder. Briar quieted, not out of fear, but as if she understood in a way no one else had ever reached her. On April 18th, Jessie wrote in her research log, "Maggie is forming a language that belongs to no species, not to command, but to connect. Every sound, every motion is a bridge between lost instincts and love taking shape." That evening, Jessie brought her notes to the porch, sat beside Caleb. Full moon, gentle breeze, the smell of rain is still in the air. "Do you think," she asked, "this is beyond science?" Caleb lit a cigarette, but didn't smoke. "You see that porch light?" He pointed. "Yes, I turn it on every night, even when no one's coming, even during power cuts, even when I don't need the light." Jessie nodded, puzzled. Caleb said slowly, "Because I think sometimes you have to do the right thing before you even know why." In the fractured yellow glow, Jessie understood for the first time. Maggie wasn't raising cubs. Maggie was keeping a promise she didn't know she'd made. To the universe, to the young, to a love she hadn't gotten to give. By late August, the forest began to change. Leaves turned gold, then red, then brown. Not in a rush. Not all at once. Like everything in this mountain region, even change looked like something that had always been there. Caleb tucked in his shirt, poured his morning coffee, and sat on the porch as he did every day. On the steps were paw prints, small, round, software, not bear, not house cat. It could only be Ash or Briar. They had begun to leave 2 weeks earlier, quietly, just as they had arrived. No calls, no farewells. They just no longer slept in the shed, no longer suckled on the tree roots Maggie brought home, no longer trailed behind when the wind changed direction. Instead, the forest edge cameras showed they were building territories. Ash, up north, near a small stream at the foot of a rocky slope. Briar chose a high knoll near a dried-up lake where the grass reached a person's knees. But then, on nights with moonlight or soft rain, one of them, sometimes both, returned. Not for food, not from fear. They had grown now. They could hunt, climb, defend themselves. They came back to curl beside Maggie in the old nest. That straw nest once soaked by flood, once home to a love no one dared name. Caleb watched through the kitchen laptop. Jesse kept the cameras running, recording every moment. He smiled quietly. "They're not coming back out of instinct," he told Jesse. "They come back because they miss their mother." By autumn, Maggie no longer stayed in the shed. She moved up the western slope, where a deep hollow was surrounded by wild blueberries and a few fallen logs. She built a new den, not with straw, but with pine needles, bark, and dry moss. Neat, warm, still. People think bears build dens to hibernate, but Maggie didn't sleep. She still roamed daily, still stalked field mice, still brought back berries, and sometimes still circled back to the old shed, sniffed around, and lay there for a few hours. Jesse joked it was visiting memory. Caleb said nothing. He just watched as if he knew. There are places where, once a heart has held love, it will always be home, even if no one lives there anymore. That winter came late. The first snow fell in mid-December. Light, powdery, the entire farm was cloaked in silence. The porch light still burned. One night, around 2 a.m., the camera caught a figure crossing the snow. It was Ash. He walked slowly past the fence, climbed the old trail to Maggie's new den. Not in a rush, not calling, just walking. Then rubbed his head against the old bear's body, as if no time had passed. Maggie opened her eyes, didn't lift her head, just shifted slightly, made room. 4 minutes later, Briar appeared from the other direction. The three of them lay close in the Appalachian winter. No sound, only their breath, rising like smoke, weaving together in the air, an invisible thread connecting 3 heartbeats with no shared blood. Jesse sat glued to the screen, chest full of something that no longer felt like research. Caleb, for the first time, placed a hand on her shoulder. Said nothing. Later, when Jesse's team published their first scientific paper, its title was Cross-Species Motherhood, Nurturing Behavior and Emotional Bonding Between a Black Bear and Bobcat Cubs. The article stirred the scientific community. A professor from Cornell wrote, "Perhaps we've spent too long studying how animals resemble humans, and forgotten to ask whether humans are still worthy of how animals love each other." In the early spring of the following year, Maggie stopped appearing on the camera. Some believed she had gone further, seeking a new den to birth cubs. This time, her own. But Caleb didn't think so. One morning, he found on the shed's doorstep a small pile of moss neatly arranged. In the center, 3 wild blueberries, ripe, unbruised. A gift, a farewell, or a way to say, "I remember." No one could be sure. Only one thing was clear: it hadn't been left there by the wind. The story of Maggie, Ash, and Briar became a quiet legend across the Appalachians. It wasn't turned into a book right away. There were no bronze statues. It was simply told dash. By firelight, over moonlit tea, or in the quiet gaze of someone who once lost something. For Caleb, that spring, he began doing something unusual. Planting straw again in the old shed corner, not to raise chickens, but so there'd be a place if they ever want to come back. He didn't wait, didn't expect. He just wanted that if one night the moon rose and the snow hadn't melted yet, that house would still be open. The porch light is still on, and his heart still wide enough to hold something impossible. Because sometimes The most beautiful things in the world don't come to stay. They come to remind us. If a heart knows how to open, it doesn't care about species. If this story touched something in your heart, please like and share it to help spread this cross-species love to others. Don't forget to subscribe for more emotional stories about wild creatures who teach us how to love again, how to be gentle, and how never to leave anyone behind. Turn on notifications, because who knows, the next miracle might be waiting for you, deep in the woods.